Hey friends, if you like the Nexus Podcast, the best way to continue the learning is to join our community. There are 3 ways to do that. First, you can join the Nexus Pro membership. It's our global community of smart building professionals. We have monthly events, paywall deep dive content, and a private chat room, and it's just $35 a month. Second, you can upgrade from the Pro membership to our courses offering. It's headlined by our flagship course, The Smart Building Strategist, and we're building a catalog of courses taught by world-leading experts on each topic under the Smart Buildings umbrella. Third, and finally, our marketplace is how we connect leading vendors with buyers looking for their solutions. The links are below in the show notes, and now let's go on to the podcast.
Welcome back to the Nexus Podcast, everybody. I'm Brad. I've got James with me here, your favorite smart buildings and connected buildings podcast. For the full experience, always subscribe to our newsletter if you're not yet. That's where you hear about everything that we're doing. Go to nexuslabs.online. You can subscribe to our newsletter right there. So today, we are excited to bring Dr. Steve Burrell to the podcast. He's the former CIO of Northern Arizona University. He just retired this year. Welcome, Steve. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Steve spoke twice at NexusCon 2025. He spoke in the facility management track on a presentation called How NAU Uses AI and Copilot for Various FM Use Cases. And Steve also spoke in the ITOT track, the networking track, on a scalable realization of digital twins with an IDL. So tons of stuff to talk about. We're going to bring Steve into it in just a second. But first, we got to do our At the Nexus, which is what's going on in our world between James and I. James, do you want to start us here with what's going on with you?
I'll start with our next event, which is on April 15th. We're going to dive deep into condition-based maintenance. It is a Nexus Cast, so that means it's a virtual conference. And what that means for people, if didn't go to the first one, which we did in January, it's basically we're going to set the context at the beginning. So we'll have a presentation, kind of like our old buyer's guides for people that used to go to those when we did those a few years back. And then we'll have 5, 6 what we're calling playbook accelerators. So we'll present the playbook, and then we'll have speakers come in and talk about where they met obstacles, where they experienced friction in that playbook. And we're actually going to have them teach the solution this time. So it's not necessarily focused on here's what we did and like a case study, but we're actually trying to put together lessons for people that they can come and take back into their own buildings immediately. And so this is the first time we've done an event with that format. We're going to see if it works and hopefully then take it to all of our future events moving forward. So come check that out. We will have, as of this time, we have Clockworks, Code Labs, Demand Logic as 3 vendors that will definitely be presenting, but we're obviously working on filling out that lineup. So definitely come visit.
Yeah, and for those, you were talking about the playbook accelerators, this kind of new format where we're trying to find the tidbits, the golden nuggets, the lessons learned that people can share about their experience. We're going out and finding those in the world as we're talking to people who've done condition-based maintenance or are at some level of that. So if you're either in the trenches struggling with it, just getting started with it, or if you've succeeded and seen all the skeletons in the closet, reach out to us because we'd love to talk to you about your experience so that we can bring those lessons into what we teach.
And I'd say we're a little bit nervous about this format because it's new, but and it's, I think I'm also nervous about it, Brad, because it's not what anyone in the industry is used to before. What we found ourselves talking about over the last few weeks is when we've watched hundreds of presentations at our conferences and events at this point, and what we often find ourselves saying is that someone talks for 15 minutes or 10 minutes, and what we actually wanted the 10 to 15 minutes to be about was half of that 14th slide, which is really the nugget where it's someone could we want you to teach that. We don't need the full context and the full story. And so for us, it's uncomfortable because we're asking people to do stuff that they're not used to. And so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. And I think that's a good segue in just a second at the Nexus thing, which is that we just released our NexusCon call for abstracts. So for our in-person conference in October, you can now go to our website and submit that you want to speak there. But we're following all the same rules that James just explained there. So the application looks a little differently. We don't want to hear like your whole story of how you implemented some technology into your portfolio and it changed everything. We want to hear that terrible struggle that you went through for 1 month and how you figured out the right way to approach it differently and how that can save somebody some time. So it's like the context, just like James explained, is going to be at the beginning of the sessions at NexusCon. We want you to zoom way in on that teaching that you can give somebody. That's the Playbook Accelerator. So go apply. We'd love to hear what you can share with us at NexusCon.
And our main thesis here is that the industry doesn't need more case studies. We've done a lot of case studies. We don't need more. Sorry to all the vendors out there, but we don't need more validators. Like case studies being used as validation for a vendor being legit. Like we have a lot of vendors that are legit and they will be exhibiting at the conference and they will be demoing. What we need now is for the building owners that are in the muck. We need to help them get unstuck. And so that's our thesis. And if that sounds good, we'll see you. Yeah, we'll see you in Detroit.
Yeah. Very last thing before we dive into it. I explained this last week, but just to touch on it again, we've got this building owner VIP process this year where basically the more involved you are in helping us prepare for NexusCon, you're submitting abstracts, you're giving us feedback, all these things, you are earning your spot at this, exclusive a dozen people at a VIP dinner the first night of NexusCon for building owners. And all the ways that you can, participate and get on that list will be emailed to you once you sign up for the conference, which is free for building owners to sign up for. So if you want to come to dinner with us, a very nice, fancy, fun dinner Monday night of the conference, check that out and help us out because we want to make this as good as possible for you guys.
And we should give a shout out to the people at Honor Health, which is down in Steve's neck of the woods in Arizona. They heard the last podcast episode, and now we have I don't know how many people coming to NexusCon. So they're obviously plugged in to the podcast and excited to host you all in Detroit.
Can't wait. Okay, let's bring Steve into it. So Steve, I always think since this is about buildings, we got to start with like this context setting. So tell me about Northern Arizona University and what kind of the campus is like, what your portfolio of buildings was like.
Yeah, so something like 700 acres on the main campus in Flagstaff, Arizona, 127 buildings, something just shy of 7,000 spaces, 3,000 zones, almost 7,000 IoT things that we monitor for about 1.3 million data points. And, very typical kind of regional university of about 30,000 students, a heavy residential population. I think at one point we had 25,000 students in local housing and on campus. So, it's not a small enterprise. It sits in a gorgeous place. If anybody's been to Flagstaff, I think you know that. But the conditions can be challenging. Most people think Arizona is all hot and deserty. Flagstaff sits up on the Colorado Plateau in the largest contiguous ponderosa pine forest at 7,000 feet, and so lots of swings in temperature seasonally. Up over 100 inches of snow typically during wintertime, and summers are pretty mild and beautiful. So anyway, it kind of gives you some context about there. I was, as you mentioned, I just retired from there in January, having spent 10 years as a CIO there on the back end of a 43-year career in higher education IT leadership, and just a fantastic experience. And it was a real exciting opportunity for us to peel back some new layers to write a new 10-year master plan to create the AI-enabled sustainable smart campus. And so I think a lot of what I talk today will probably be my lived experiences based on bringing that to fruition, over the last 4 or 5 years.
Sure. I think it's fascinating that you were the CIO, the Chief Information Officer, and you were tasked with that. I think that's kind of unique. We usually don't hear that role as the champion of the smart buildings program, and maybe that's part of the reason that you guys had so much success. I mean, did you feel like that was unique that you were assigned to that with that title?
Well, in some ways, yes. I mean, it all started with a 10-year master planning process, which is very typical of higher education institutions to go through. So, it's typically you're thinking about where the roads go, sidewalks go, where are the new buildings, what are we going to tear down, that kind of stuff. But I had a very progressive president, Jose Luis Cruz Rivera, who said, Steve, we need to push the boundaries on this a little bit. AI is going to be a thing. We know that. But smart campus initiatives that we had kind of toyed with and played with a few were having some great impact. So we rolled all of that into the Sustainable Smart Campus Master Plan and that process, which took us about 2.5 years to complete. And through that process, the facilities officer and I, were partnering around lots of concepts and whatnot. So, yeah, it is unique. And when I go to NexusCon again next year, I might be the only CIO in the room. Who knows? But I've been to a number of other conferences where it's a bit of an imposter syndrome. And CIOs are being browbeat a little bit about all the by building owners about the kinds of things my CIO is making us do and whatnot, and so I understand it, and it's been an interesting journey. I'm really excited to try and bridge the chief facilities officer, chief information officer's roles. And in fact, in retirement, I've been writing a book about that because I think it's a significant issue, and just positioning it so that either perspective can understand each other's and move the institutions forward, because there's such great opportunity in this. And I can tell you from 40 some years of experience, most CIOs have not been, tangential to this. It's all been about, HVAC in my computer room, or the fire stop I need, for my low voltage networks, and project plans. It's never been an integrated conversation with facilities. So it's an exciting time, and NAU is an exciting process and remains an exciting institution to follow.
We see that this same theme playing out, Steve, where when we see all the universities engage with NexusCon and our events and community, we see it from one department usually. There's a lot of energy managers, like higher ed energy managers in our community, a lot of folks that are full time on the university side in FM that are focused on controls. Those are the two main angles I feel like we see. There's maybe 30 universities that are going to be at NexusCon this year, and those are the two personas. And it's interesting thinking about how in other verticals there are smart buildings titles, and their job is to go across departments, but at universities it doesn't seem to be that way.
It's starting to get there, but it's by no means is it a pervasive concept. And I think part of my retirement and lived experiences and opportunities like I'm having with you today is to share that perspective and say there is great opportunity there. And if you're a CIO at one of these institutions and you're just wanting to understand what OT and controls and digital twins and all this kind of stuff really means, go have lunch with your chief facilities officer or somebody and start asking some questions.
Yeah.
Because there's real opportunity there to increase efficiencies and effectiveness across the enterprise.
I'm wondering if you have advice for those energy managers and people in the FM groups. How do they get their CIOs engaged in the conversation?
Reach out. Reach out with the opportunity, like I said, in a casual setting, not through some kind of governance or formal thing, but very casually invite yourself to the opportunity. I've my doctorate's in leadership, and I've mentored and coached a lot of people, and the one piece of advice I give people is just have the courage to invite yourself to a meeting. And have a few questions pre-formed and no surprises, but just engage. Most CIOs that I know are happy to have that conversation to learn more. Um, and it doesn't have to be a threatening conversation, but bring some awareness, some educational to that. Talk about how the backnet works, because I can guarantee you, a lot of CIOs have no idea what backnet's all about.
Yep.
And they may not even have heard building management system in their career. So, ask for that meeting, take an educational approach, ask a few good questions, and, ask what the best opportunity is to follow up with people on their staff. And CIOs should entertain that conversation and then should, oversee people getting together to talk informally, exploratory, if you will, the art of the possible when it comes to these things, and just begin sharing a body of knowledge. And frankly, that's what the book I'm writing is going to try to do. Cast the perspectives, cast what's common, and then, prescriptively try to give people a way forward that might work. But just to raise the awareness of it and the opportunity. So, yeah,
Cool. That's great.
Have the courage to say yes.
I want to get into condition-based maintenance because it's top of mind for us, and
Right.
I think you've got quite a bit of experience there. So, like, your presentation at NexusCon is in AI for FM. You talk about LLM generated insights on systemic issues, which is maybe like level 10 of condition-based maintenance, level 10 out of 10. But if we rewind all the way, in your AI-enabled sustainable campus master plan, it's like page 5 where you introduce going from reactive to proactive. So I want to kind of rewind you before we get all the way to the AI use cases
Page
here.
5.
It is. It's I saw it right away. So talk about 2016 or I don't, you choose,
Sure.
but you get there and what's the status of maintenance and where you're trying to take it?
NAU is typical of any large regional university. I mean, we're in firefighting mode. To use a Western analogy, right? We couldn't get away from firefighting long enough to prune the forest to prevent it from happening. And resources and just the mindset, very much reactionary. When I came in as CIO around 2016, we had some budget cuts or some consolidation. We were centralizing IT, so we were naturally looking for some efficiencies and some economies. One of those that we found was in how we managed our classrooms. Over 400 classrooms on that campus, and a staff of maybe 10 or 12 people to do it. But again, we were in firefighting mode. So we bought some technologies that allowed us to have insights and deployed the technology and the software to have insights into what was going on in the classrooms with our projectors and our podium computers and the audio amplifiers and all this kind of stuff, which is really kind of point on a university's mission was instruction. And we were just having too many issues where things would break, and we would lose that hour and a half of opportunity to educate the students. And it's a 16-week semester. Faculty don't get that back. So there was a great use case there to be more proactive, and so we deployed these things and we did it, and we were able to do that kind of just-in-time thing, right? And so instead of having the periodic maintenance of going around every summer and cleaning fans, which was everybody's favorite thing to do, the fan filters so that these laser projectors and projectors wouldn't burn up during the year. We monitored the equipment, IoT type devices and software, so we could see where and set thresholds where certain devices, probably needed some attention, and we could get out there before it failed. And we kind of just flipped the chart on the whole thing to being not reactive or doing, periodic, repetitive, preventative maintenance, but really based on the conditions of that classroom, responding to the needs and doing remote support. And we standardized technology, which some faculty were very afraid of and were concerned about. But in the end, tremendous compliments, to my staff about how they use that technology to turn around and do proactive condition-based responses. So the faculty weren't using and losing that time in the classroom, and really, turn things around in a lot of other ways. So that's kind of where it all started, from a smart campus kind of thing, and then that evolved in through our ability to do some other things that way across campus, like with our network components and some other things. But when it came to an AI-enabled, sustainable smart campus master plan, we had to take that same kind of attitude and approach to how we were maintaining the institution on whole, and that meant facilities having to rethink it. Um, we had tried for 18 months using PhD experts to create data ontologies and consolidate 7,000 data points or things across multi millions of data points, and we failed horrendously. Um, so during the smart campus planning process, we met some vendors and we chose one of them to implement a digital twin, and we did that, and that gave us the insights that we needed into what was going on with HVAC systems or lighting systems or water systems, et cetera, et cetera. But like most institutions, I mean, our work center was still very much human operated, not, I would say, principle based. We knew who the squeaky wheels were, and we didn't want them to squeak. We spent a lot of time appeasing people, as it being too hot or too cold, um, and not really making a lot of progress, still being reactionary. But somewhere along the way, we started getting this data and these insights out of our digital twin that allowed us to really begin to see some things, right? And see that that blower motor's running 24/7, 365. Something's not right. Um, and we were trying to get back and understand what design looked like, right? Was that part of the design? Was that the way the building was intended to perform? And we found a lot of variation in that, right? And we're like, how did we get here with, well, we had individual BMS and 4 or 5 different people operating those things over the course of 10 or 15 years. And we got away from baseline, and it was frankly ugly, and very inefficient. With the data coming in, we were then able to start pivoting and started being a little more proactive about some things. But yet we still had the human factor, which is really, really important in all this, of, not really understanding what those base conditions were. What were the parameters? What were the thresholds, that would trigger some kind of proactive response, based on what was happening out there. Um, and how do we carve time out for the tradespeople who are going around fighting fires? How do we make this thing? How do we turn this ship without hitting the rocks? And bring the resources and change the mindset. And it takes time. First, you have to trust what you're seeing. Secondly, you have to be willing to sit down and rethink what's a priority, what's important, what's critical, what needs to be done now. And frankly, it took several pretty serious incidents. One, we had a dampener that stuck open in the springtime, and it can be very cold in Flagstaff. 20 in the 20s in the morning or at night, and get up in the 60s during the day. I mean, there's these wide swings at 7,000 feet of elevation that you get. And well, the dampener stayed open at night. The glycol froze in the HVAC unit, and we had a huge water spill in the forestry building, which cost millions of dollars. That's the short of it. Um, and had we been paying attention and trusting what we were seeing, and had adjusted how Our work center was looking at that information, and our managers were looking at that information to actually affect, a change or a fix before something bad happened, we could have avoided that. We ended up avoiding that very same scenario in another building 6 months later. So, you know, did it help us? Yeah. Was it painful? Certainly. But there was those kinds of catalysts that we had to embody in order to really make condition-based responses
I feel like
feasible.
this is the first lesson of condition-based maintenance, which is wait for some sort of multi-million dollar damage to happen and then say, I have a better idea.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
Steve, you just like explained, I think, kind of a fascinating trajectory through all that I think is a little unique. And I'm going to oversimplify, but since you're the CIO, you kind of started by talking about like audio, visual, and IoT, and kind of nailing that, and then it kind of started to get into HVAC and facilities
Well, yeah.
management,
So
where
he's saying, Brad, he started within his own department, right?
yeah,
I'm going to start in
exactly.
IT and I'm
yeah.
going to prove this out. And then he's
That's
like,
right.
well, if we're going to really do this thing, we got to go to the facilities group
Yeah.
to change how they're doing it. Yeah.
And
Mhm.
that's where you started with like a data problem, and you had,
Right.
because they had all these different systems. It's actually when you're in your NexusCon presentation with Mapped, Jose De Castro for Mapped, he says
Yeah.
NAU had a converged network, so that part was easy. I've never heard a vendor say that about a building owner before, that he was like, you did that part, so they really came in for the ontology aspect. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I had this vision for a smart campus and what it should be. And, so we did a lot of that kind of pre-work um, to converge the networks and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of mindset and cultural change that happened too on the IT side. And then, but to scale it, right, through a master planning process, meant involving not just facilities people, but the people over in our health clinic, the people in athletics, a lot of the stakeholders, who are doing a lot of things on their own too, that need to be brought into that, change of mindset. It's not just about automating things and making things better. It's not about just deploying technology. We have to change the minds and hearts of people along the process as well.
Totally. When you were talking about the transition with the facilities group, Steve, you mentioned, well, there was a couple steps in there that map to as we develop this condition-based maintenance playbook for others. There's a couple of steps you mentioned there that kind of map to the steps that we have in there so far. One of them is trusting what you see. And I'm
Mhm.
wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that. You guys use Willow, who
Right.
has mapped in their stack. So Willow is what is providing the insights, right? And that was what a lot of
That's
your
right.
presentation
That's right.
on
That's right.
AI was about. Can you talk about how you got the facilities team to trust those insights? And maybe it was this huge emergency at the forestry building you were talking about, but what does that process look like?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like a disaster to bring people together. But I think we were a little naive about things, to be honest. That being on the IT side of things and working with the chief data officer and ERP systems and the LMS, of course we trust the data. Of course we trust what we see coming in. It was a mindset and a professional practice that was just natural. On the facility side, that's not necessarily true. I mean, it's the old story of the trades guy who can go out and put his hand on a compressor and say, "Yeah, it's good for another 6 months." I've met those people. I mean, I've had those kinds of people in my home telling me, "Yeah, you don't worry about your forced hot or hot water heating system. Uh, you got enough glycol in there," and the guy just tasted it. I mean, who does this kind of stuff? I mean, so let's tip our hat to the tradespeople who really understand these buildings and know things and have learned. But the data can be trusted. It speaks what it speaks, and particularly as we see turnover in the trades and younger people coming into us, or people who are maybe unfamiliar with what's going on in a particular building or a particular system. We have to rely more and more on that data. Now, another example. We detected a water flow meter was running pretty high across the weekend. And so we start looking at that and we're thinking, there's probably a water leak somewhere because there shouldn't be anybody in that building over the course of a weekend, especially during the summer. So, why does the flow not necessarily depreciate or become less on Saturday and Sunday? So we sent facilities folks sent some people out there to find the leak, and of course the trades guys are like, there's no leak. If there's a leak, we'd have found it years ago or something, or months ago. Well, they sent them out and they'll say, well, go look again. And they come back and say, hey, yeah, we found the leak. It was in an odd place, some place that wouldn't be detected. And the soils in Flagstaff are very volcanic, pumice, and so water flows into the ground very well. Anyway, so we come back and the indicators and the meters show that a little less water, but still pretty high. So we send them back out. So there must be another leak. They're like, no, there's not another leak. So they go out and they find another leak and they fix it. And then we see the waters based on the data going down to a consumption level that we would expect in that building on a long weekend. Well, that kind of experience then ignited some, trust in them, which was really pivotal. And they started looking at the rest of the data, like, well, I wonder if there might be a leak over in this particular area, or look at the irrigation system over here. That seems like the flow's too high, and we don't run irrigation on those days. So why is it? And so that experience, that lived experience that the tradespeople had, lined up with the data, allowed them to build trust in the system, and then really kind of turn the page to start a more proactive look at that data, and the ability to go out and maybe during slack time, of course we're going to go deal with plumbing issues in residence halls today, but hey, we've got a couple hours of slack time, let's go look at that problem we had in the irrigation system. Right. And it really does inform practice, and it really did increase the efficiencies and the effectiveness of individuals. And again, these are tradespeople who have worked in these environments for maybe decades.
Right.
But that trust issue, I think, is one that has to be learned. And in hindsight, I think leadership could have done more orchestration around that to find some opportunities, set them up as examples, and tackle it, as a team, as opposed to just, getting cross with people and saying, yeah, you need to get out and look at that. I think there's a softer approach and one that's ultimately more effective.
It reminds me of Lockheed Martin's Golden Nugget. I think that's what they called it, program, Brad,
right, yeah.
Where the leadership, which is Devin Tracy, who's a great leader of their program, she just started celebrating these finds, right? The FDD found this, and then we went out and looked at it, and we found that the duct was fully caked over to where there was no airflow, and then you're basically giving that person an award, right, for using the data to find the thing. And I thought that was a really cool practice. Steve, I have one more question before we talk about the AI piece of this, which is, once they then started to trust the data, what was the process like to then change their day-to-day workflows, right? So you kind of hinted at it a little bit, but I think people are wondering, how do I make this not something that's just sitting off on the side and more deeply integrated into their actual workflows? How's that work?
Well, we recognized the need that our work management system, TMA, needed to be integrated with Willow, so that we could set some conditions that would allow us to create work orders that were proactive, right? So meeting certain criteria. So we went through a painful process of doing some technical upgrades, but the more painful process of sitting down with people and saying, well, what are the kinds of conditions that would warrant, a priority response, and getting people in the room and stakeholders together to flesh that out and create, some kind of chart, some kind of methodology to that, so that we could program that in, to our work management system, and as well as the Willow system. And so, there were still human aspects of that to be overcome, because everybody kind of wanted to pick things apart and say, well, what if this happens and this happens at the same time? Which one are we going to choose? And again, it's kind of a process you got to let people go through, because if they do that, then they kind of own it on the back end. So we integrated the work management tickets and workflow bidirectionally with Willow, which was extraordinarily helpful. We set some parameters, about what would flag, and we made those part of a priority schema on any given day of, like, here are the things that probably aren't burning down the house, but you should probably go look at in a preventative, preemptive kind of way. And, the university's still working its way through those kinds of things as it learns more and more and more about, things that are going on. But ultimately, there was a mindset in how, and a methodology using the digital twin as to how, we could respond to that. And we took a lot of the mundane retyping and stuff and automated all of that, so that information, once it was addressed, we could go back, throw that into Willow as part of the case, and do some comparisons to see, in fact, could we measure rectification of that issue, and if so, how? And again, that cyclical kind of human intervention, technological infusion, integration, and practice. Right? It was an accelerator. It was pushing the flywheel every day, as Jim Collins might say, to, towards really being proactive and condition-based, and managing the site based on the conditions at hand. Is it perfect there? No. Lots of credit to our new facilities vice president there, Jeff McKay, who, is looking at all of this and starting to reformulate, really the strategic approach to how facilities is run. He decided to bring some stuff back in house as a result of what we were learning and what we were able to do. We were holding our vendors more accountable to outcomes, right, to the work that they did as well, because nobody works in an environment where they're using just their own people to respond to a lot of these things. So it had lots of tentacles that are going out, all of which, I think were positive, but yet, not fully developed yet. And so it's an ongoing story, and one that's critically needed, because universities are facing, across the nation, are facing, people, talent shortages, budget shortages. A lot of institutions are having to downsize because the demographic cliff of students just aren't there, mergers, repurposing buildings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of this and that kind of proactive approach, very important to institutions being able to manage the future.
Sure. So I think that when people want to hear these juicy AI use cases, and you can hear them in depth on the recording that we have of Steve's presentation, but you were just talking about like getting your maintenance personnel to trust the data, and that's kind of what some of your AI use cases is just kind of, I think, extrapolating on that. So the first one was you guys talked about ingesting 6,000 building documents, so as-built O&M manuals into your system, so that basically technicians could use it in Copilot, as I understand. Was that the main motivation? Is that this is just like more trusted data that technicians can use, so that when you're losing, older personnel with experience, you're accelerating the new people with this access to data?
Well, I think that was part of it. I mean, very similar to that, right? Is just empowering the people who are there. We may not have been losing people, but just empowering people's time. I mean, how long would it take for a technician who maybe hasn't seen that compressor, that HVAC unit in a long time, to understand what's needed? And like I do on my home projects, how many trips to Lowe's or Home Depot back and forth do I have to make? Right. And what are the efficiencies of that? So I think part of it was an efficiencies standpoint to help people understand the problem, the specifications they should be seeing, how the device should be behaving. and then providing some prescriptive part numbers and a process
Yeah.
that they can review before they even leave the facilities building to go out into the field, and make that process much more efficient. So I think that was part of it, and that works really well in that context.
What I like
And
about that is like in terms of change management and like getting the technicians to change their workflows, right? What I like about that is it sounds like it either has happened or it started to happen where Willow can become the place where they go for answers rather than digging somewhere else. And if that's the place you go for answers, that's also where you get your insights. So it's just like getting them more like acclimated in terms of this is your daily tool rather than something that you go to when you have time. I
that's
think
right.
that's really important.
That's right. It is important because, again, a question begets another good question most of the time, right? It's like, well, where else am I seeing this, or what other buildings on campus have this device? And AI has the ability to answer that kind of stuff and do so in a matter of seconds, which might have taken a tradesperson, hours to unpack. The other subtle thing I think it helps is management to understand the scope of the work that needs to be done too, right? I mean, HVAC guy can say, it's going to take me 4 hours to work on this because it just is. And now, the AI can say, well, these are the steps that need to be done. And yeah, that's probably going to take 3-4 hours. So
Totally.
it helps management understand, cost and context and complexities, if you will, as well, so they can be better managers and help people understand the best uses of their time. So that we kind of started there. The other thing is to actually use some of the accumulated data that we get. Um, it usually took facilities people, like sustainability officers, days to write reports or to understand. One of the things I think the AI is really good at is saying things like, across my 127 buildings, if I had $1 million to spend, where would it best be spent to improve energy savings, for example, right? Or where could it be best be spent to improve occupant comfort, or whatever parameters you want to put on that. That kind of question we used to hire consultants to do. And for big dollars, to get data that was probably inactionable.
Sure.
But this kind of stuff's very actionable, and it pulls together a broad array of different data across the whole data ontology, both static, and even going back and then saying, okay, well then if I've got all this deferred maintenance going on, where can I best spend my monies to affect deferred maintenance, or run a scenario that takes this building completely offline? What are the implications of that? These are hard questions, and they're not, technically hard. They're correlatively hard, right? It's just pulling all the pieces of data together and getting it in front of people, who can make intelligible decisions, the human in the loop kind of thing, right? So I think that's the other thing that we started to see, over the last year. There was the ability to generate those kinds of reports, and those reports flow up really, really well to cabinets and boards and legislators, and you can show the data behind it, and you can have it, orchestrate that conversation for you in ways that may have been difficult for some people to bring forward in the past. So, both short-term operable insights, AI enabled as to where to spend my time, um, as well as the long-term aspects of managing a very large campus. So AI has the ability to do that, and I think increasingly AI. We're going to see. I feel like we're going to see a lot of these devices that are IoT devices. They're monitoring HVAC systems or pumps or chilled water plants or whatever. They're going to get smarter and smarter. That AI is going to be onboarded onto those controllers and those things. And so, moving more and more away, from maybe the traditional way of absorbing it to more agent-based kinds of things. And the devices themselves are going to become more intelligent, and I would say probably self-healing in a lot of ways. So, yeah, we're not gonna. The Chinese robots aren't coming to probably turn the wrenches anytime soon.
Yeah.
I think there's a real opportunity to enhance the human experience and the human effectiveness in all this by doing some of the things we've talked about today and thinking proactively about where human organization, mindset, and culture can meet these new technological innovations to create environments that are actually, fun to work in. Nobody likes going around putting out fires all day long.
Yeah.
So,
And people can check out Steve's full presentation. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. It is behind our paywall. You need to be a Nexus Pro member to watch the full presentation and get the slides and stuff like that. But you can check out all the other things that gets you like into our web events and things like that. So, and then we'll also put the master plan. You guys have published that. We'll put that into the show notes as well, so people can. Brad mentions page 5. I think there's over 100 pages. It's a big
big
document.
It's comprehensive.
Yeah.
So, and happy to answer questions that people might have about that and the process and everything like that, and connect you with the people back at NAU who are doing a really good work day in and day out to make a difference for our students and faculty.
Awesome. Well, let's close up shop here.
Yeah. So carve outs. According to the sheet, James, you get to go first today. What's your carve out?
I just read a book that was fascinating. It's called Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World, and I'd highly recommend it. It's the story of the Mongols and the Mongol dynasty, and the book covers about 200 years, so like 3 or 4 generations in Genghis Khan's family. And the novel part about it is that there wasn't a written history of the Mongols. It was all kind of like third-party hearsay from either Europe or elsewhere, but they found a text that was written in some language that they had to translate, and that text got translated in the 90s. And so all of this sort of detailed history of the Mongols is only very recent in terms of understanding it. And so this book was written to sort of popularize what they learned in that text, and it's absolutely fascinating. So I'll just leave it there.
Dang, I want to read it. Go, it's a good preview. That's great. I've got an app recommendation. So my favorite app right now is called Yuka, Yuka, and it's like a health app for foods. It's totally free. The way it works is you scan a barcode of any food, and it'll just rate that food from 0 to 100 on a health scale. It's obviously a little subjective, but it's super helpful if you're just like browsing through the store and are trying to find a healthy option. And my example is I like frozen egg white frittatas for breakfast. Like you microwave them for like, a minute. There's this brand I like, and they're good for you. They're like a 78 out of 100. That's like pretty good on there. I went to the store and I bought a different brand, and then I thought to scan it when I got home. 8 out of 100 for the same exact product, different brand. And it's because this one has a bunch of additives that are like potentially carcinogenic, like banned in the EU. So I especially like it because it's good at like checking out additives that like I don't like this 25 letter word. I assume it's not good for you, but I'm not sure. It's really good at helping you with those. So highly recommend it. I'm like obsessed with scanning things and deciding whether they're good or bad for me.
That's awesome. That's a great one. All
right, Steve, what do you got?
Well, I'm learning how to be a retiree, I think, and probably failing pretty miserably at it. But spent some time down the Keys decompressing, and that was a marvelous experience, camping on the beach and doing some diving and all that fun stuff. But not letting go of some of these passionate things. I've got like 4 or 5 book ideas I'm working on. One of them is this OTIT thing, and I'm excited about that. So we'll keep reading and writing and trying to share some insights around that, get it all out of my head. I've been engaging in more like local sports. Last night, my wife and I went to the high school baseball game.
Nice.
Just getting out there,
Fun.
supporting young people and what they're doing here in the St. Mary's community, and just trying to take in some life. And yeah, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing.
All right.
Whoa, I got to write that down. That's good. I like that.
So what's your main thing, right? And I think that's what I'm trying to figure out in retirement. What are my main things going to be? And certainly lots of appreciation for all my colleagues over 43 years of doing this. But I can just tell you surely I am not missing the day-to-day operational tasks associated with being a CIO. But miss the camaraderie and the collegiality, and the crucible of forging new things through the pressures that are there. So I'm going to continue to mentor and help aspiring leaders, make that leap. So anyway, lots going on, and then again, nothing at all. So
that's awesome.
You're keeping busy. Well,
congrats
thank you so much.
Retirement.
Yeah, congrats, and thanks for joining us, Steve. We appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. NexusCon was an awesome conference, and I'm really excited about maybe carving out some time. Maybe I can get up to the one in October.
Let's do it.
Love it. I'd love to have you.
Okay, friends, thank you for listening to this episode. As we continue to grow our global community of changemakers, we need your help. For the next couple of months, we're challenging our listeners to share a link to their favorite Nexus episode on LinkedIn with a short post about why you listen. It would really, really help us out. Make sure to tag us in the post so we can see it. Have a good one.